Overwatch's support class ruined Overwatch. It ruined the first game, and it still continues to ruin this game.
What am I supposed to do? As a magic, then triple support, bro. I dive some kid. Oh, let me just fucking heal myself. Let me just use my 18,000 sustain move, bro.
Support is an easy baby to roll with overpowered characters that don't require a lot of skill, and people are still bad at it.
Two supports are totally fine, but with three supports, it feels like this fun back and forth pace shooter instead turns into this waiting game where basically one or both teams are waiting up to 30 seconds out of a time of waiting for the enemy team to stop basically being invulnerable, which gets a bit absurd.
If it wasn't clear from the intro, making a healer in a role-based game is an incredibly difficult balancing act. You make them too weak, nobody's playing them. You make them too strong, nobody's dying, nobody's having fun, and people are only playing said healers out of necessity. Besides, maybe it's not even worth it after all. Why would you even make a hassle to perfectly balance something that appeals to such a small niche? Alright, what's all that rack for the other room?
Was never heard from again!
Scratch that, it's still worth it. Today, we're going to look at all the stuff that Nomadic does right that modern hero shooters still haven't considered to this day, despite TF2 supposedly being outdated. The best place to start here would be the Medigun, which when you compare to the main healers of the new age, is surprisingly undertuned. The gun itself doesn't have too much range. It heals at 24 health per second, which is pretty good for TF2, but definitely wouldn't fly in other hero shooters. Let's look at an off-healer in Marvel Rivals, for example. Rocket Raccoon's healing orbs can dish out about 70 health per second with each orb, with the orbs being able to drone out quickly one after another. Granted, this healing discrepancy isn't as large as it seems, as if we consider the average health of Marvel Rivals being double that of TF2, that's around 10 healing per second. But once again, we're talking about an off-healer out-healing the main healer here, and we haven't even discussed range and turrets heal at once, in which the medic easily loses out here. The only advantage the Medigun has is the fact that you don't need to reload it, but even then, that's only a minor upside. So, we've avoided making a potentially overpowered healer that invalidates the hard work damage dealers put in. Good job! But why is anyone gonna play this character if the healing done is meager? Well, remember how I said the heal rate is about 24 health per second? That's not actually the max healing medic can output. You see, there's a little mechanic the Medigun has called crit heals. If someone doesn't take damage in the next 10 seconds, then they get healed more from a Medigun, with the maximum heal rate potentially tripling. Additionally, people respawn off the maximum heal rate, but they're already at full health, so it's seemingly pointless. But back to crit heals, what Mages do is alleviate one of the main frustrations of healers, when there's too many injured teammates. With a standard healer, having multiple people heavily dead is going to be a pain to fully heal, as it's a slowly cycle through every person. With the medic, all the time you spent healing the people in the front of the line is paying off for later because the people who waited longer end up healing faster. Essentially, you reap the reward of faster healing without directly impacting the flow of combat because the crit heals specifically heal when the battle is over. If this amount of healing affected combat, then it would be widely frustrating and make the game crawl to a halt, as shown by the many times the ports are too strong in games like Overwatch. That all being said, even though crit heals are a great design choice, it's definitely not the biggest part of what makes the medic the medic. What really defines the medic's gameplay are two core features that make him play unlike any other healer, the first of which being Overheal. Overheal is a pretty simple mechanic. As medic, you can make someone have 50% more health, but said health decays over time, unless you keep the beam on them. An incredibly simple mechanic, but one that makes all the difference. For one, it gives the medic incredible utility, as he can give other players an inherent advantage before a fight begins by increasing their maximum health. Light classes no longer die to sniper quickscopes, medium classes can now tank 2 point-blank scattergun shots, and the heavy can now survive an entire magazine's worth of grenades. It also complements crit heals too, as you can quickly buff up freshly respawned teammates, or bring light classes back from the verge of death to be stronger than ever. Secondly, it completely redefines how the medic plays compared to other support classes. In other games, if there's no one to heal, you're basically doing nothing, which is why modern supports are basically DPS hybrids. But with medic, the gameplay is still mainly focused on healing, but now you can do something to whoever already has full health, now bolstering them for future battles. However, a good medic shouldn't just be focused on overhealing, as there's one more important mechanic than medic has that puts him above the pack. You already know it, it's Ubercharge. Before I talk about what Ubercharge does, we'll talk about how you charge it, which is by healing people, most of the time. However, it charges less when pocketing people that are already at higher levels of overheal. This incentivizes the player to heal targets that are actively taking damage, are currently debuffed, which the minigun also helps reduce, or are at low health, rather than sitting with one player the entire game. It also encourages a riskier playstyle, as the best place to build Uber is near the front lines where everyone is taking damage. Another thing about Ubercharge is that unlike other ultimate abilities, you lose a charge on death. Now you have extra pressure to survive and not play stupidly, because dying now means losing one of the most important resources in the game. Not to mention, the existence of Ubercharge makes you a massive target, meaning you must remain vigilant so you don't get picked off by a spy, sniper, or scout. In other words, this all makes Medic's gameplay a careful balancing act of playing enough around the team to charge Uber, but making sure to back out when it's too dangerous. But I haven't talked about Ubercharge without talking about what it does, so why don't I just show you it? It's utterly devastating. While modern support ults mostly lean towards safety nets or team buffs to stabilize a bad situation, Ubercharge more functions as a battering ram that can tear down the toughest defenses. It's an integral part of the game, because if it wasn't there, the pace of TF2 would be slowed down dramatically. Sure, it can be also used for self-preservation purposes, as the con phrase, "pop it, don't drop it," is baked into TF2 culture, but that just makes it more interesting, as it to continue surviving so the rest of your team can, even if it means sacrificing your most powerful option in the short term to do it. Compare this to the usage of modern support ults, and they're just held onto until an opponent successfully starts pushing, which ends up slowing down the pace of the match, the exact opposite of what Ubercharge does. Overall, if crit heals and overheals are what stabilize Medic's designs, Ubercharge is the crown jewel that brings it all together, creating a much more active support class that feels just as exciting to play as the damage dealers. Because instead of playing a weaker DPS that has to babysit their teammates sometimes, Medic's gameplay is laser focused on properly keeping the team up before crushing Druid enemy defense with Ubercharge. But let's talk about its non-healing options anyways, and why it's good or bad. To start out, the syringe gun isn't just a mediocre self-defense tool, but it's unwieldy in every sense of the word. Its DPS is comparable to the stock SMG, all while shooting incredibly slow projectiles with a harsh drop-off. You may technically be able to kill some of it, but it's definitely not recommended. It's the worst stock primary in the game, but there's a reason for it, to make sure you're not trying to kill other people. Remember how I stressed earlier on how Medic's healing gameplay is pretty engaging on its own thanks to all the little quirks of the minigun? This just further reinforces that you're playing a full healer and not a hybrid. However, Medic does have one okay option for combat scenarios as a treat, and that's his melee, which is only by virtue that it's the same as everyone else's. You hit someone for 65 damage, enough to either 2 or 3-shot most classes. This is actually one advantage Medic has over other support classes in similar games. As a default, melee in Overwatch and Marvel Rivals are pretty weak, meaning that these characters inherently have less self-defense options. This means while characters like Luna, Snow, and Zenyatta are much better at disrupting you mid-fight with long-range projectiles or stuns, Medic is better suited for defending himself because Torrent that Bonesaw is surprisingly good at cutting someone's health down. This, of course, is disregarding some crucial unlocks because I want to talk about Medic at base rather than a modified version. So we're just going to pretend that Crusader's crossbow doesn't exist. Bottom line is, the medics that Medic has for pushes him back into a healer role rather than just shooting at whoever and occasionally drawing out a CC ability. But this video was initially about balance, so why don't we look at everything we've covered so far and put it into the perspective of how the game plays as a whole. When you look at how all of these supports function, what's immediately clear is that while most modern healer classes slow down the game, the Medic speeds it up. While most healers will specialize in making sure that any damage done to a TI can be undone, the Medic can only do that when someone has avoided combat for a significant period, and bring them back stronger to make more offensive plays. Modern healers will stay back and avoid risks at all costs. The Medic is forced to give up his life to optimally build Uber, but not so much that he will lose it. While modern support ultimates will completely stop a fight from getting anywhere, Uber charge is often the key for a massive battle to break out. Essentially, the main role of modern healers is they're tuned in a way that they end up dragging battles for too long, when healing in FPS game traditionally was just supposed to get you back up after a tough fight. Medic was the perfect character properly used healing to make the game better paced, but the industry has forgotten about him in favor of trying to replicate the success of Overwatch. The funny part is that Overwatch initially had lower healing rates all around, but the release of Ana caused immense amounts of power creep. Hence, why we're here today. The con aren't why support should heal as much because you need to keep everyone alive longer so you can play the game more. Therefore, so you can technically have more fun in the game.
They out-heal Duelist damage and then some. They are constantly able to put out levels of sustain that would make other video games weep. And you know what? I'll say it again. This should not be changed. Why? Because it makes the game more fun. You have dealt with a team that has had only one healer. I know you have because there's no role queue here. You must see what a painful difference it becomes. Not receiving heals or not having enough healers makes the game that much more unfun because healers being strong means you get to be alive longer, which means you get to play more, which means you get to have more fun in the game. That's the secret sauce. Healers being strong means everyone else in the game stays alive longer and you're alive longer to play more game.
I find this argument very flimsy, as it completely disregards the other side of the fight. When I'm playing a character meant to deal some damage, I absolutely hate when all my work just gets invalidated by one healer. Medic doesn't do this, as he feels much more reasonably tuned. Not to mention, I don't want to fight all the time. Sometimes I want some periods to relax. Is that too much to ask for in this modern gaming landscape? Besides that, Medic's just very fun. He's a class that has to take risks and play actively, with his gameplay sometimes being more intense than the damage dealers. He's a bit hard to play due to his lack of crowd control or mobility, but I like that, as the difficulty makes the gameplay even more rewarding. My point is that Medic proves that you can make a well-rounded support class while making it boring to heal. The fact we still haven't gotten a healer on his caliber proves that the gaming industry refuses to learn any meaningful lessons from TF2. As for the lessons in question, I think we should focus on making supports with less overall healing but more healing related utility, ultimates that are better used offensively than defensively, and make primary weapons less suited to general combat, because lock-on supports are still cancer. Thanks for stopping by, you guys. See you in the next one. Goodbye.